It's U of L Today on 93.9 The Ville. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
Welcome to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville in Louisville, Kentucky. So glad you're joining us for the next half hour or so. Dr. Jason Chesney is an endowed chair in oncology at the University of Louisville and deputy director of the James Graham Brown Cancer Center. He's a cancer researcher who's digging into inhibitors and immunotherapy. He's here to explain that research and how it will hopefully dramatically cut the number of people who die from cancer each year. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
Good to have you back.
It's always nice to be here.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about some new developments, I guess, in immunotherapy and some of the things you're working on with specific types of cancer. Why don't you talk about those, and then that'll get us rolling here.
You know, cancer kills 600,000 people in the United States per year. The National Cancer Institute spends about $6 billion a year to fight cancer. That's, to put that into context, it's about 1% of what we spend on our defense budget. So cancer is a huge problem, and it's markedly underfunded right now. The results of basic research that has been funded through the National Cancer Institute and by the community and fundraisers at the University of Louisville have been incredible. And by that I mean that we have ended up in a situation where we understand that cancer is something that happens to everybody. It's not just the people who develop tumors and unfortunately die of their cancer. It's you and I. We've developed cancers. Our immune system gets activated against the cancer, and those cancers are cleared from your body, just like an infection.
So everybody has cancer.
I believe today that 100% of people over the age of 30 have developed cancer.
Really?
Really.
I mean, that's the most stunning thing I think anybody said on my radio show.
That's my strong belief.
Okay.
And that's based on the science that's been developed both here and at other institutions. And that science, what it's telling us is that when we go throughout our lives and get exposed to carcinogens, that normal cells in your body, the epithelial cells that line your gut, the blood cells that fight infection, those cells are constantly being hit by carcinogens. And I'll give you some examples. Ultraviolet radiation. When you walk out, when I walked from my car to here, a little peak of sun came out today, but a little bit of ultraviolet radiation can transform melanocytes in your skin. When you go to the corner hot dog stand, eat a hot dog that's got sodium nitrate in it, that nitrate has been shown to be a carcinogen that will transform cells in your gut, the epithelial cells in your gut. When a bus goes by, a TARC bus goes by, and you breathe in some of the diesel fumes that are filled with thousands of carcinogens, when somebody smokes a cigarette next to you, you're breathing in carcinogens. So we're constantly being exposed to chemicals that will modify the DNA and transform cells into cancer cells. And so we believe today, and this is not a new theory, it's a theory that's been out there for 100 plus years, but we believe today that theory has really been substantiated by a lot of the remarkable successes we've had in therapeutics when we're treating cancer patients. And so the strong belief is that as we move forward in our lives, we're exposed to carcinogens, our immune system clears any cells that have been transformed into cancer cells, and we're fine. We never develop a transformed cell. We never develop a tumor. And it's my strong belief that by the time you're at the age of 30, you've probably developed cancer. What happens, unfortunately, over time is as you get into your 40s, 50s, and 60s, which is really, when you're in your 60s, the peak time to develop cancer, that you get enough mutations from all those carcinogens, and your immune system tends to become tolerant. It starts to learn to accept these transformed cells. And then that's when you develop not just one cell, but 2 and 4 and 8, and they divide and they become a tumor.
Cancer.
And and all of a sudden you're sitting there with a big tumor in your liver that's causing problems, nausea, vomiting, pain, etc. And that translates into doctors saying, okay, we need to look into this thing. Oh, we found a tumor, let's biopsy it and then treat it. Well, the fact of the matter is that your immune system's been fighting this all along, and it's only really in the last 10 years that we've fully understood how powerful the immune system and important it is to fighting cancer. And so we've now learned that there are proteins and cells that are designed through evolution to turn off your immune system. And why would we have that? It doesn't make any sense, right?
Right.
You want an immune system.
Right.
Well, we have that because when you get a cut on your arm and you get a little infection, great, we want an immune system to come in and clear the infection, but you have to heal. And you can't heal if you don't turn off the immune system. You can't have all that inflammation, reactive oxygen species, all these bad things that are happening. You have to turn off the immune system. So through evolution, our immune system has figured out to turn itself off. And it was only in the last 10 or 15 years that we've understood how it does that. And so right now, the huge advance that's going to transform cancer care in the United States and throughout the Western world is the idea that we can block the brakes, that literally the off switch for the immune system. And so there are antibodies we are now not only testing in clinical trials, but have become FDA approved. You know, the Food and Drug Administration has approved these antibodies because they're improving survival in patients. We have a lot of chemotherapies. That's where it all started for cancer patients, and they shrunk tumors. But most patients who develop metastatic cancer that spread to their visceral organs, their lungs, their liver, et cetera, you know, we could treat it. We could keep them alive for a few extra months. Today, we can literally take these antibodies that activate their immune systems and induce durable responses that make them live a normal lifespan.
And this is what you're now calling immunotherapy, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. How far along is this immunotherapy? How far along is it that you said it's FDA approved, or some are FDA approved, that it will work in every person, or will it just work on certain cancers? Is it just work on certain people to leave the switch on, leave the immune switch on?
That's a great
how far
question.
along are you?
And so we started with a cancer called melanoma. Melanoma is a type of cancer that comes from melanocytes in your skin from ultraviolet radiation. It is the most immunogenic cancer, and by that I mean it has the most mutations in it. So by having all those mutations, it's the most readily seen by the immune system because it looks foreign, just like the virus, a rhinovirus that causes the common cold. It looks like something different from you. That started now, and when I said they were FDA approved, they're FDA approved for melanoma. But importantly, most cancers can be seen by the immune system. And so those drugs that we're talking about that started out being just approved for melanoma now are being approved, have been approved for lung cancer, kidney cancer, a subset of colon cancer, gastric cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma. So this is not something that's specific for a particular cancer type. This is something that really activates your immune system against multiple types of cancer. I mentioned the 600,000 people who die in the United States of cancer every year. Well, the real statistic that I think is important to note is that 1 out of 2 men will develop cancer in their lifespan.
That's not good. So that means either me or you are getting cancer.
You got it. Well, there's 3 of us in the room, but yes. And I'm going to mention that because 1 out of 3 men will die of cancer. 1 out of 3 men will die of cancer. The statistics are, rock solid. The women do much better, and they do better because they're much more focused on their health care than men are generally, and they're better about some of, making sure they don't smoke,
Eating
drink
habits,
too
those kinds
much,
of things,
eat too much, keep out of the sun. And it actually, one of the statistics that's most interesting to me is, and my wife's Alden Clare, she's a radiation oncologist, and she keeps me healthy. And one of the most interesting statistics is that men who are married have less rates of cancer and cancer-related deaths. But women also suffer from cancer. 1 in 3 women will develop cancer, and 1 in 4 will die of cancer. So this is a very common problem. Approximately half of all deaths in the United States are caused by cancer that are not accidental. It's either cancer or heart disease. And we believe that in the next 5 years, we're going to see a 25% reduction in cancer-related deaths. Well, I spend my days thinking about this. I spend my days seeing cancer patients who are 30 years old, 40 years old, who are leading, wonderful lives, have children, great careers, and they come into my clinic, and there's virtually nothing we can do for most of these poor people.
Right, they're stage 4 or something like that.
Stage 4 metastatic cancer, whether it's lung, breast, et cetera. And these immunotherapies are making a huge difference. They already have in a variety of cancer types. Where we are now is, now that we understand that we can block the off switch for the immune system and get it activated against the cancer, now what we're trying to do is get the cancer to declare itself more robustly. And so we block the off switch and we activate the immune system at the same time. It's
So you can target it a little easier.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're talking with Dr. Jason Chesney from the Brown Cancer Center at the University of Louisville. We talked about immunotherapy. There was another thing that came out that you and I had talked about a little bit about herpes virus cells, as I understand it, being used to combat cancer.
Right.
Explain that.
Yeah, so about 30 years ago, it was discovered that certain viruses that can cause diseases, including the herpes virus that causes oral herpes, would selectively kill cancer cells. And we don't even today fully understand why those viruses selectively kill cancer cells, although we believe that because the cancer cells are proliferating so quickly, the virus itself can actually interrupt that proliferation and cause the death. But we don't fully understand it. Well, there's this scientist, he's a London-based scientist, his name's Rob Coffin, he's come to visit us several times over the last 3 or 4 years, who took one of these viruses, and it just so happens, there's a lot of different viruses out there that do this. It just so happens it's the herpes simplex virus 1, and he looked at a variety of clinical isolates, viruses from patients, and looked to see if they would actually kill cancer cells better than killing normal cells. And he found 3 or 4 isolates and then genetically modified that herpes virus, the one that he liked the best, the one that killed the cancer cells the most, so that it would not only kill the cancer cells, but it would also activate your immune system. So he inserted a gene that translates into a protein that turns on your immune system. And we've been testing this virus now at the University of Louisville for about 7 or 8 years. It got FDA approved for the treatment of melanoma in 2015. The virus is called TVEC, T-V-E-C, and we're now testing it in multiple solid tumor types. And melanoma is an easy one for us with a treatment like this because we can inject the virus directly into tumors that are outside the patient's body. Mm-hmm. Well, it's harder to do that with a breast cancer patient or a lung cancer patient. But what we've done is we've commandeered our interventional radiologists, and what they're doing in conjunction with our clinical trials program is injecting the virus directly into tumors in the liver right now. And we're on our second breast cancer patient, and she's doing great. We believe that combining that injection of a virus that activates the immune system with one of these antibodies that have now been FDA approved for all those cancer types will lead to durable responses, not just in melanoma, not just in lung cancer, but in all cancer types. Right. And so we're the lead center in the world for this. The clinical trial, it's a phase 1 clinical trial open at the Brown Cancer Center right now. It's open at 5 other sites, 2 in Spain, 1 in Switzerland, 1 other one in the United States. We were the first in the world to inject a patient in their liver with this oncolytic virus, and that patient went to Florida and had a great fall.
And is doing fine? Is healthy?
It's wonderful.
Okay.
She's
and
doing
so
great.
how long has it been from the time that she was
year.
injected? So it's been 1
so
year.
So all of her treatments she had progressed. Oncologists will say that the patient failed this treatment, but in fact what happens is we give the patient all of their standard therapies, and then the patient progresses in terms of their tumor, and then there's really nothing left to do. And in Louisville, there are limited options. Clinical trials are, for the most part, concentrated on the coasts and in Texas. And the reason that the Brown Cancer Center was developed in the late 70s, early 80s was to be a place for patients to go and get treated with experimental therapeutics, and to bring in specialists who had the high level of training that was required for these complex stage 4 metastatic cancers. And so we're at a place today where we're the place that MD Anderson and Sloan Kettering are sending their patients because we've got these phase 1 trials. And this is a great example. The fact that we were the first in the world to try this and that it seems to be working is just incredible.
Talking with Dr. Jason Chesney from the James Graham Brown Cancer Center at the University of Louisville. So how many more patients do you need to try this on? I guess it's a combo of the herpes virus, basically, and immunotherapy, putting them together to treat these folks. How many more folks do you need to do this on, and how long a period of time before it gets to the point where, 5, 6, 7 years from now, whatever it is, we are treating patients not just with perhaps liver cancer, but maybe some other cancers.
Right. So, I mean, the answer to that is we'll be doing this until no one dies of cancer in the United States, and then that'll translate into no one dying of cancer throughout the world. And these are not trivial trials. These cost a lot of money. They involve a partnership between our university, third-party payers, health insurance companies, and pharmaceutical companies. A good example, we're combining TVEC with a drug called pembrolizumab, which is an antibody that does what I just talked about, which is blocks those breaks and allows the immune system to get hyperactivated. Seeing great results, everything looks wonderful. That's 660 patients.
Wow.
That's one cancer type in a relatively small set of cancer patients. We're talking about tens of thousands of patients. It's my opinion, well, I'll just give you the statistics. If 10% of doctors, oncologists, cancer doctors, participate in clinical trials. Less than 10% of cancer patients enroll in clinical trials. The reason that 600,000 people die of cancer every year in the United States is because we're not doing enough clinical trials. And this was happening in the 60s and 70s with kids. And with leukemia. And leukemia in kids, it's a horrible disease, but it's a simple disease. It's usually one mutation because time hasn't passed. They haven't eaten all those hot dogs and been exposed to all that smoke and the ultraviolet radiation. It's a simple disease. And we're up at 90-95% cure rates with those kids. But it only happened because every kid went on a clinical trial. 90% of cancer patients don't go on clinical trials. 90% of cancer doctors don't participate in clinical trials. It's a huge problem. It's something that we can prevent. We're only spending, it sounds like a lot, $6 billion. It is a lot, but it's less than 1% of what we spend on our defense budget today.
Well, and now Joe Biden, the vice president, is in charge of starting the war on cancer,
Yes.
I think is the way he
Yeah.
pronounced it. Is that working? Is that having any impact? In your field, is it trickling down to the researchers? In other words, by just the vice president saying, I'm having a war on cancer, has that helped?
I think having the vice president and the president, Obama also has come out in support of this, be in support of more funding for cancer research makes sense. And nobody wants to reduce our defense spending at this time, but it's clear to me that everybody I've ever talked to, about 1% of the defense budget going to the National Cancer Institute to double its budget makes complete sense. Richard Nixon started the war on cancer. I shouldn't say that. I mean, there were plenty of people before him, but he was the one who brought it into the world of politics. I think Biden is doing the right thing. I will say that their goal is $1 billion of new funding.
Right. And
that's about 10 or 15% more than what we're getting.
Right.
We are at that point today where our children, I have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and my wife's pregnant right now. Those kids probably are not going to die of cancer. And today, 1 in 2 men will get it. 1 in 3 men will die of it. 1 in 3 women will get it. 1 in 4 women will die of it. I don't believe that's going to be the case for our kids. But this is not the time to say, oh, we're not going to spend an extra few $1 billion on cancer research. This is the time to invest in cancer research. And frankly, it's the time to say, if you have cancer, you should be going to an academic cancer center at a university that is running clinical trials, because you're going to get the very best care there. That's where the best doctors are. That's where the clinical trials are. You're going to have more options than you'll ever get at a private hospital. And this is the time to really join the fight.
And that's what we're doing at the James Graham Brown Cancer Center at the University of Louisville, right?
Absolutely.
All right, Dr. Jason Chesney, again, great to have you on. I learned a lot today. So we're going to cut the cancer rate by 25% in the next few years.
5 years.
5 years. All right, very good.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Jason. Here now with Fred Espenek, who is known as Mr. Eclipse. Is that correct?
I've been called that.
All right, and Fred is he's a former NASA physicist, and he's retired now, but he still dabbles in, and you said you're working harder now than you ever were with all this eclipse talk coming up in the next year, correct?
It is. It's a busy year coming up with the 2017 eclipse passing through the U.S.
You're here at the University of Louisville as a guest of our physics department, and you're making a speech and talking to folks about what's coming up in 2017. So why don't you tell us, Mr. Eclipse, what is coming up in 2017, and why is it so interesting for those of us who are in Kentucky?
Well, 2017 will bring a total eclipse of the sun to the U.S. to the continental U.S. for the first time since 1979. So it's been over 38 years since we've had a total eclipse of the sun visible from the U.S. So these are relatively rare phenomena for any one particular point on the Earth's surface. And the reason why the average person might be interested in seeing something like this is I would say that it is the most spectacular natural phenomenon you can see with the naked eye, bar none. It's just amazing. I've been to 27 of these things now, and the hair on the back of my neck still stands up. They're so exciting, so fascinating, even for people who don't care a lick about science. It's just a beautiful natural phenomenon.
And for folks who were not alive back then, what was it, 38 years ago you said was
Right.
the last one? What are they going to see next year? And it's next August, right?
It's August 11th, 2017.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry, August 21st, 2017. Well, every total eclipse begins as a partial eclipse, and a lot of people have seen partial eclipses. They're not that unusual a partial, and they're not terribly exciting either. They're interesting to look at through special eclipse glasses or seeing them projected on through a pinhole camera or something. But that's where the difference between partial eclipses and total eclipses ends, because the last 10 or 20 seconds of a partial eclipse, when the sun becomes completely covered by the moon, then the moon's shadow sweeps across your location, and you're enveloped in this dark shadow for typically 2 to 3 minutes. And during that time, suddenly you go from bright daylight to a very eerie twilight. You see sunset colors around the horizon. You see brighter stars and planets in the sky. Animals tend to react to it. Birds start playing their morning songs. Flowers start closing up. People go crazy because it looks like it's the end of the world. It's a very frightening event if you don't know what's going on. So you can imagine people who didn't understand this thousands of years ago were terrified by it.
Right.
It's a very primal experience. And looking up into the sky, you see the sun's bright disk now is completely gone, and what's left is the black, eerie black disk of the moon, surrounded by this gossamer halo, the solar corona, which is just incredible looking. It's hard to describe. There are lots of photographs you can look at online, but nothing comes close to actually seeing it with the naked eye, because your eye can see the brightest parts of the corona near the edge of the sun to the very faint streamers that go out. And that's hard to capture on a photograph.
And you said you've seen, what, 27, I think you said, of these?
I've been to 27.
Been to
I haven't seen them all.
Okay. Well, when you say you've been to them, then why haven't you seen them?
There's weather.
Ah, gotcha.
And you can make all these plans.
Clouds,
You can travel halfway around the world, and at the last minute, clouds can interfere and get in the way.
So that'll be a bummer next August if we have a bunch of
It
cloud
can
cover.
be. So that's what a lot of eclipse chasers are concerned about now, is where's the best weather going to be? And of course, we have difficulty predicting the weather in 3 days, let alone 10 months, 12 months in advance. So all I can say about the weather is every place along the eclipse path, and I should say the eclipse path is a 68 to 70 mile wide corridor that sweeps across the U.S. from Oregon down to South Carolina, passes through southwestern Kentucky, and inside that path is where you see the total eclipse. And every place along that path has good weather on some days and some on not. There's no guarantee of any particular place.
Right.
It tends to be clearer in the western states, but on eclipse day, it could be clear any place.
So, but you'll be making last-minute plane reservations to Hopkinsville if the weather in Hopkinsville is going to be better than Casper, Wyoming, right?
I'll be in the car, but I'm ready to drive 1,000 miles east or west in the day before the eclipse.
Just to see wherever the best weather is.
Right. Waiting for the forecast, that last 24 to 40-hour forecast on where the best weather is going to be.
Without getting perhaps too technical so that even I won't be able to understand what you're talking about, what is the physics behind this only happening X number of times per century or whatever? Why does it only happen? Why does the moon only pass directly in front of the sun one time every 38 or 39 years or whatever it is?
Well, actually, total eclipses occur about once every 12 to 24 months.
But they happen in different parts of the world.
But they happen in different parts of the world, yeah, because first of all, you can only have a total eclipse of the sun during the new moon phase, when the moon passes between the Earth and the sun. And that happens, we get a new moon 12 times a year.
Right.
But the moon's orbit is tipped to the Earth's orbit around the sun. So most of the time the moon passes above the sun during new moon or it passes below it. So it's only once every year or so where it passes directly between the Earth and the sun to allow an eclipse to take place. And when it does, the moon shadow sweeps across the Earth's surface, but that shadow is quite small by the time it reaches the Earth. It's only about typically 50 to 100 miles wide, and that covers a very small amount of real estate in terms of the Earth. So that's why any one location doesn't see an eclipse very often.
And when that happens, have there been instances of places on Earth, remote places, where perhaps they hadn't got the word that, hey, you're going to get hit with a full solar eclipse on Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they freak out? Has that been happened in recent times?
Even where people, especially in undeveloped countries,
right.
even where the local populace has been told about the eclipse, unfortunately, in some cases, there's a lot of mythology about it. People are warned that it will cause birth defects if women look at the eclipse and they go indoors to hide from it. People are told not to stare at the eclipse because it'll steal your soul, and they don't look at the eclipse, they look down at the ground. So even with the modern day and age, there's still a lot of superstition around the world. And even in the United States, you get school districts deciding that, oh, people are going to go blind, we better lock all the children in the classroom, when there's this fantastic educational opportunity with just a little bit of education and understanding of how to safely view the eclipse that is squandered when the kids are locked away in school and forced to watch it on television.
Now, I remember I would have been about 18, 19 years old at that time when the last one came through, and I seem to remember looking at it through a pinhole or something in a piece of paper. Can you look at? So those of us in Louisville that are going to be just outside the swath of the full eclipse, what should we be doing next August when we're standing outside?
To the people of Louisville, next August, what you should be doing is driving 150 miles south and getting into the path of totality, because it is that close and is the most spectacular thing you will ever see. Now, if you can't do that, you can see the partial phases by making, if you have a kitchen colander for straining spaghetti, hold that up and let the sun shine through it, and it'll project images of the crescent sun on the ground below.
Right.
Simplest thing to do.
Okay. Other than driving to Hopkinsville or wherever.
Yeah, driving down to Hopkinsville or any place in the eclipse path. And if you need a map for the eclipse, all you have to do is go on the internet and Google the 2017 total solar eclipse maps, and you'll find maps of exactly where to go.
I've got to ask you, because I've got you here, one totally unrelated question to this. Mars.
Okay.
A few days ago, President Barack Obama said that we should have the goal of putting a man on Mars by 2030. Is that a realistic expectation from those of you who are current or former NASA folks?
Well, this is a very biased opinion.
That's what I'm looking for.
I think the biggest problem with the American space program is that it's a toy of the political system. Every time you have a new political candidate coming in, a new political party, they change the entire agenda of the space program, and you can't plan a 30-year mission when your objectives change every 4 years or every 8 years.
And so what would you're the next president of the United States, or you're in Congress, what would you do? Break off NASA and make them a totally separate entity that's not subject to political whims?
I think something like that along those lines has to be done, where it's not so easy to make changes to the direction of the agency.
Okay, all right. Well, Fred Aspanek, thanks for being here at the University of Louisville. Looking forward to your discussion. Thank you all for listening. Go Cards.